The trunk hit the ground with a thud that sent up a cloud of dust, so thick, Lydia Peterson had to cover her mouth with her handkerchief. And in that moment, standing alone on the train platform in Fort Stockton, Texas, in the sweltering heat of June 1876, she wondered if she had made the gravest mistake of her life. The advertisement had seemed so promising back in Boston, where rain kept the streets perpetually muddy, and the textile factory where she worked kept her fingers perpetually bloodied. A rancher seeking a wife, well-educated, interested in agriculture and science. The letter correspondence had been brief, but encouraging. Now, staring at the desolate stretch of buildings that comprised this frontier town, she felt the weight of every mile she had traveled pressing down on her shoulders. No one waited for her on the platform. The other passengers dispersed quickly, greeting family, or heading toward the town's main street with purpose. Lydia stood beside her trunk, a battered leather case that held everything she owned, including the books that had cost her 3 months of wages and her father's old surveying equipment. The sun beat down mercilessly, nothing like the gentle warmth of a New England summer. This was heat that seemed to have substance, pressing against her skin through the layers of her traveling dress. "Miss Peterson," the voice came from behind her, rough but not unkind. She turned to find a man approaching, his hat pulled low against the sun. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 26 or 27 to her 23 years. Tall and lean, with the kind of build that spoke of hard work rather than leisure. Dust covered his boots and the lower portion of his trousers. As he came closer and removed his hat, she saw sun-weathered skin and dark eyes that studied her with what seemed like equal parts curiosity and concern. "I am Lydia Peterson," she confirmed, straightening her spine the way her mother had taught her before consumption had taken her. "Are you Mr. Ashford?" "No, madam. I am Caleb Ashford's foreman, been working his ranch for near about 8 years now. Name is Cole Anders." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Ashford, he sent me to fetch you. Had business in town he could not get away from." Disappointment flickered through her, though she tried not to show it. Of course a rancher would be busy. She had known ranch life would be different from the carefully scheduled existence she had left behind. Still, she had imagined her intended would at least meet her train. "I see," she said simply. "Well then, Mr. Anders, I appreciate you coming for me." He moved to pick up her trunk, grunting slightly at the weight. "What you got in here, madam, feels like rocks, books mostly, and some scientific instruments." She saw his eyebrows raise and felt the familiar need to explain herself. The advertisement mentioned interest in agricultural science. "I brought my father's soil testing equipment. He was a surveyor and amateur geologist before he passed." Something shifted in Cole's expression, a flicker of interest that he quickly masked. "That's so. Well, let's get you out of this heat. Wagon's just over here." The wagon was utilitarian, clearly meant for work rather than comfort. Cole hefted her trunk into the back with practiced ease, then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. His palm was calloused, rough against her gloved fingers, but his grip was steady. She settled onto the hard wooden bench, arranging her skirts as modestly as possible. As they pulled away from the station, Lydia took in her first real look at Fort Stockton. The town was small, comprising perhaps 24 buildings clustered around a central street. She spotted a general store, a saloon, what appeared to be a hotel, and a small church with a simple wooden cross. Everything looked sun-bleached and worn, as if the relentless Texas heat was slowly eroding the town back into the desert from which it had been carved. "How far is the ranch?" she asked, more to break the silence than from real curiosity. "About an hour's ride. Ashford's place sits northeast of town, up against some hills where there's still decent grazing. Cole kept his eyes on the road, guiding the horses with easy competence. It is a good spread. 3,000 acres, decent water from a spring-fed creek. And Mr. Ashford himself. Lydia tried to keep her voice neutral. What kind of man is he? Cole was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Lydia began to regret asking. When he finally spoke, his words were measured. He is a hard worker. Built that ranch up from nothing over the past 15 years. Fair with his hands, pays decent wages, keeps to himself mostly. It was not exactly a ringing endorsement, but neither was it a warning. Lydia supposed she would have to form her own opinion soon enough. She turned her attention to the landscape rolling past, trying to see it with fresh eyes rather than disappointment. The land was harsh, but not without beauty. Low hills rose in the distance, their slopes covered with scrub brush and hardy grasses. The sky stretched overhead in a vast dome of blue, unmarred by clouds. In Boston, buildings had hemmed in her view of the sky. Here, it seemed to go on forever. She could understand how people might find that either liberating or terrifying. You know much about soil composition, Mr. Anders. The question came out before she could stop herself. Born of nervousness and the desire to talk about something she understood, he glanced at her, surprise evident on his face. Can't say I know more than what any rancher knows. Some land grows grass better than others. Some holds water. Why do you ask? I have been studying it for several years. My father taught me the basics before he died, and I continued learning on my own afterward. Different soils support different crops and grasses. The mineral content, the way water drains through it, the organisms living in it, all of these factors determine what will thrive. She could hear the enthusiasm creeping into her voice and tried to moderate it. Most men found her interests peculiar at best, but Cole did not dismiss her words. Instead, he seemed to consider them seriously. That could be useful knowledge on a ranch. We have been having trouble with one of our northern pastures. Grass just will not grow right, no matter what we do. Cattle will not even graze on what does come up. That sounds like a mineral deficiency, or possibly too much alkali in the soil, Lydia said, her mind already working through the possibilities. I could test it if you like, determine what the problem is. Might be Mr. Ashford would appreciate that. There was something in Cole's voice she could not quite identify. Not quite approval, but close to it. They fell into a more comfortable silence after that. Lydia watched the landscape change as they left the town behind. The road, such as it was, wound through increasingly rough terrain. She saw cattle in the distance, their red hides stark against the golden-brown grass. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals she could not feel from the ground. The ranch house appeared gradually, first as a dark shape against the hills, then resolving into a low, sprawling structure built of adobe and wood. It was larger than she had expected, but not grand. Functional, like everything else she had seen. A barn stood nearby, along with several smaller outbuildings. Corrals held horses and a few cattle. The whole operation had the look of a well-run, if modest, enterprise. Cole brought the wagon to a stop in front of the main house. Before he could move to help her down, the front door opened and a man stepped out onto the porch. This had to be Harold Ashford. He was older than Cole, perhaps in his mid-40s with graying hair and a thick mustache. He was stocky where Cole was lean, and something in his bearing suggested a man used to authority. He did not smile as he looked at Lydia, but neither did he frown. "Miss Peterson," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Welcome to my ranch. I apologize for not meeting your train myself. A situation arose that required my attention." "I understand," Lydia said, accepting Cole's hand to climb down from the wagon. Her legs felt unsteady after the long journey, but she forced herself to stand straight and meet Harold Ashford's gaze directly. "Thank you for arranging my passage from Boston. Come inside out of the heat. We can talk in comfort." Harold turned and went back through the door, clearly expecting her to follow. Lydia glanced at Cole, who was already pulling her trunk from the wagon. Something in his expression made her hesitate, though she could not have said what. A warning, sympathy. Before she could decipher it, he looked away, focusing on the trunk. The interior of the house was cooler, the thick adobe walls providing insulation from the brutal heat outside. The main room was large and sparsely furnished with sturdy, practical pieces. No decorative touches softened the space. It was clearly a bachelor's home, functional rather than comfortable. Harold gestured to a chair near a cold fireplace. "Sit. I will have Rosa bring water." Lydia sat, grateful to be off her feet, and looked around with what she hoped was polite interest rather than dismay. What had she expected? Something softer, perhaps. Some evidence that a woman might make a home here. But of course there was not. That was supposed to be her role. A Mexican woman appeared from what must be the kitchen, carrying a pitcher of water and 2 glasses on a tray. She was perhaps 50, with kind eyes and work-worn hands. She set the tray on a small table between Lydia and Harold, then left without speaking. "That is Rosa. She cooks and keeps the house," Harold said, pouring water for them both. "She does not speak much English, but she is capable." Lydia accepted the glass gratefully and drank. The water was cool and sweet, better than anything she had tasted in Boston's crowded tenements. Harold watched her in silence for a moment, then spoke abruptly. "I will be direct, Miss Peterson. I am a plain man with little time for fancy courtship. I need a wife to run this household and provide me with children. Your letters indicated you are educated and practical, not given to romantic foolishness. Is that accurate?" The bluntness stung, even though Lydia had told herself she expected as much. This was a business arrangement, not a love match. She had known that when she answered the advertisement. Still, something in her rebelled at the cold, transactional nature of his words. "I am practical," she confirmed, keeping her voice steady. "But I am also human, Mr. Ashford. I hope we might at least develop respect and friendship, even if passion is not to be expected." He grunted, which she took as neither agreement nor disagreement. "The minister can perform the ceremony on Sunday. That gives you 5 days to settle in and decide if you wish to proceed. If you find the arrangement unsuitable, I will pay your passage back to Boston." That seems fair. What else could she say? "Rosa will show you to your room. We dine at 6. Harold stood, clearly considering the conversation concluded. "Cole will bring your trunk up." Lydia stood as well, her legs protesting. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." He nodded and left through a door that presumably led to his own quarters. Rosa reappeared almost immediately, as if she had been waiting just out of sight. She beckoned for Lydia to follow and led her up a narrow staircase to a second floor. The bedroom was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a simple dresser. A single window looked out over the ranch yard. Lydia could see Cole unhitching the horses from the wagon, his movements efficient and practiced. Rosa said something in Spanish, her tone kind even though Lydia could not understand the words. Then she patted Lydia's arm gently and left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone for the first time since leaving the train, Lydia sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of doubt. What was she doing here, 1,000 miles from everything familiar, preparing to marry a man who spoke of her as he might a breeding cow? She could take his offer, return to Boston, find work again in the factories. But then what? A lifetime of barely scraping by, of blood on her fingers from the weaving machines, of cold winters in rooms that never got warm enough. No. She had not come all this way to give up at the first sign of difficulty. Harold Ashford might be cold, but he was not cruel, and she had resources he did not yet know about. Her knowledge, her father's equipment, her determination. She would make a place for herself here, build something worthwhile. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Rosa. Instead, Cole entered, carrying her trunk with apparent ease despite its weight. He set it down at the foot of the bed, then straightened, turning his hat in his hands. "Thank you, Mr. Anders," Lydia said. "Madam." He hesitated, clearly wanting to say something more. "Please speak freely. I would appreciate honesty." Cole met her eyes and she saw genuine concern there. "Mr. Ashford is a good man in his way, fair, like I said, but he is not given to warmth or sentiment. If you are looking for tenderness, I fear you will be disappointed." "I appreciate your candor." Lydia stood, moving to the window. "I did not come seeking romance, Mr. Anders. I came seeking security and purpose. I believe I can find both here, even if affection is not part of the bargain." "You mentioned testing the soil in that north pasture." Cole's voice was carefully neutral. "If you were serious about that, I could show you the area tomorrow, before you decide whether to stay." Lydia turned, surprised. "You think my decision should depend on whether I can pursue my studies?" "I think a person needs purpose, like you said. And I think you have knowledge that could benefit this ranch, whether Mr. Ashford realizes it yet or not." He met her gaze steadily. "A marriage without respect is hard enough. One where you cannot use your gifts would be harder still." There was something in his eyes, a depth of understanding that caught her off guard. This rough foreman saw her more clearly after an hour's acquaintance than Harold Ashford had after months of letters. "I would like that very much," she said softly. "Thank you." He nodded, set his hat back on his head, and left. Lydia listened to his boots on the stairs, then turned back to the window. She could see him crossing the yard toward the barn, his stride long and easy. She shook her head, dismissing the direction of her thoughts. Cole Anders was the foreman. Harold Ashford was to be her husband. She needed to keep that clear in her mind. Turning to her trunk, she began to unpack. Her dresses went into the dresser, her father's equipment she arranged carefully on top of it. The books were last. She ran her fingers over their spines, drawing comfort from their familiar presence. Agricultural chemistry, the principles of soil science, a survey of Western minerals. These had been her teachers and companions for years. At least here, she would have space to use what they had taught her. Dinner that evening was a quiet affair. Harold spoke little, asking only basic questions about her journey. Rosa served a simple but well-prepared meal of beef, beans, and fresh bread. Lydia tried to draw Harold into conversation about the ranch, but his answers were terse, providing facts without engagement. As they finished eating, Harold pushed back from the table. "I have paperwork to attend to. You may do as you wish with your evenings, but I expect you abed at a decent hour." "We keep early hours here." "Of course." Lydia folded her napkin carefully. "Mr. Ashford, I wanted to mention that I have some expertise in soil analysis. Your foreman mentioned a problem with one of your pastures. I would be happy to investigate if you think it might be useful." Harold paused, studying her with what might have been surprise. "You know about such things?" "My father taught me. I have continued studying on my own. I brought equipment that would allow me to test soil composition, determine what might be preventing proper grass growth." He considered this. "If Cole thinks it worthwhile, you may proceed, but do not neglect the household duties. That is your primary purpose here." The dismissal rankled, but Lydia kept her expression neutral. "I understand." After he left, Rosa came to clear the table. Lydia helped, despite Rosa's protests, and followed her to the kitchen. It was a large room, well organized with a good stove and ample workspace. Rosa clearly took pride in her domain. "This is a fine kitchen," Lydia said, even though she knew Rosa likely could not understand. But the older woman smiled and nodded, seeming to grasp the compliment. She pointed to herself and said, "Rosa," then pointed to Lydia with a questioning look. "Lydia," she said, pointing to herself. Rosa repeated it carefully, then patted Lydia's hand and returned to her work. It was a small moment of connection, but it warmed Lydia nonetheless. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Texas night, Lydia thought about the day, about Harold's coldness and Cole's unexpected kindness, about the harsh beauty of the land and the challenge of making a home in such an unforgiving place. She thought about her father, who had taught her to see the stories written in soil and stone, who had believed that a woman's mind was as valuable as a man's, even when the world disagreed. She wished he could see her now, wished she could ask his advice, but she was on her own now as she had been since his death 3 years ago. She had made this choice, traveled these miles, and she would see it through. Not just endure, but thrive. She would find her place here, carve out a life of meaning and purpose, even if it was not the life she had dreamed of as a girl. The next morning dawned clear and already warm. Lydia woke to unfamiliar bird calls and the sound of men's voices in the yard below. She dressed quickly in her most practical day dress, then went downstairs to find breakfast already laid out in the dining room. Harold was gone. Rosa informed her through gestures, out with the cattle since before dawn. Lydia ate quickly, then went outside to find Cole. She found him in the barn, checking over a horse's hooves. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his face. "Miss Peterson, did not expect to see you so early. You said you would show me the north pasture. I am ready if you are willing." He straightened, studying her dress with obvious doubt. "It is rough country. You will want to change into something more suitable if you have it." Lydia looked down at her skirts, already seeing the problem. "I have nothing more suitable, I am afraid. Boston did not require riding clothes." Cole considered this, then nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared into the tack room and emerged with a pair of worn leather chaps and a belt. "These belonged to my younger brother before he headed to California. They will be too big, but better than ruining your dress. You can put them on over your skirts." Lydia accepted them, oddly touched by the gesture. "Thank you. I will just need a moment." She went back to the house and managed to get the chaps on, cinching the belt tight to keep them up. She looked ridiculous, she was sure, but at least she would be able to ride without destroying her clothing. When she returned to the barn, Cole had 2 horses saddled and ready. One was a placid-looking mare with a gentle eye. "This is Daisy. She is steady and patient. You know how to ride." "I learned as a girl, though it has been some years." Lydia approached the mare carefully, letting the horse sniff her hand before stroking her neck. "You will remember. It comes back quickly." Cole helped her mount, adjusting the stirrups to fit her shorter legs. His hands were impersonal but gentle, and Lydia tried not to notice how her heart beat faster at his proximity. Once she was settled, Cole mounted his own horse with easy grace. "The north pasture is about 30 minutes' ride. The land gets rougher as we go. Stay close and follow my lead." They set out across the ranch, heading away from the buildings toward the hills Lydia had seen in the distance. The morning air was still relatively cool, though she could feel the promise of heat to come. As they rode, Cole pointed out landmarks and explained the layout of the ranch. "Ashford has built this place up smart," he said. "Used the natural features of the land instead of fighting them. The creek runs through here year-round, fed by springs up in those hills. He positioned the grazing rotation to make best use of the water and shade." How long have you worked for him? Lydia asked, enjoying the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the way her body remembered how to move with the animal. 8 years, like I said yesterday. I was 18 when I hired on, fresh from my family's farm in Missouri. Thought I knew everything about ranching. He grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Mr. Ashford taught me different. He is a hard man, but he knows his business. What brought you to Texas from Missouri? Cole's expression sobered. My father died. Farm was not big enough to support all of us, and I was the youngest son. Figured I would make my own way. He paused. What brought you from Boston, if you do not mind my asking? A woman with your education seems like you would have had options back east. Lydia considered how much to share. But something about Cole invited honesty. My father was a surveyor, like I mentioned. When he died, he left debts I had to pay. I worked in a textile factory, but the wages were barely enough to live on. The advertisement promised security, a chance to use my education for something more than survival. It seemed worth the risk. Lonely, though, coming all this way to marry a stranger. No lonelier than staying would have been. She met his eyes. At least here I have space to breathe. And soil to study. He laughed at that, a genuine sound that made her smile in response. Well then, let us go look at some soil. As they rode further from the ranch buildings, the land grew increasingly rugged. Lydia saw plants she had never encountered before, hardy desert species adapted to heat and drought. She made mental notes to study them more closely when she had the chance, wondering what they might tell her about the soil they grew in. Finally, Cole reined in his horse at the edge of a broad, flat area hemmed in by low hills. This is it, the North Pasture. Lydia studied the land with a practiced eye. The grass here was sparse and yellowed, even compared to other areas they had passed. What growth there was looked stunted, unhealthy. She dismounted carefully, pleased when her legs held steady, and knelt to examine the soil more closely. It was pale, almost grayish, and when she picked up a handful, it felt gritty and lifeless. She rubbed it between her fingers, noting how it did not clump together the way healthy soil should. Standing, she walked slowly across the pasture, stopping periodically to examine different areas. Cole followed, leading both horses, watching her with interest but not interrupting. She appreciated that he gave her space to work, did not demand immediate answers or explanations. After about 20 minutes of exploration, Lydia returned to where Cole waited. I need to run proper tests to be certain, but I believe the problem is high alkalinity, possibly from limestone deposits in those hills. The soil pH is too high for most grasses to thrive. There may also be mineral deficiencies, particularly nitrogen. Can it be fixed? Cole asked. Possibly. Sulfur can be added to lower the pH, and organic matter worked in to improve the soil structure and add nutrients. But it would be a long-term project, not a quick fix. She brushed dirt from her hands. I would need to do proper testing to develop a detailed plan. When could you do that? I have the equipment. If you can bring me samples from different parts of the pasture, I could begin testing this afternoon. She looked at him, suddenly uncertain. That is, if Mr. Ashford truly approves, and if I would be overstepping to use my time this way. Cole's expression was hard to read. Miss Peterson, can I speak plainly, please? Mr. Ashford is my employer and I respect him, but he is making a mistake if he cannot see what he is getting in you. You have knowledge and skills that could make this ranch more profitable. Any man with sense would encourage that, not treat you like you are just here to cook and bear children. The words were passionate, almost angry, and they stirred something in Lydia's chest. When had anyone last defended her worth so fiercely? Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you might realize. Their eyes met and held for a moment too long. Lydia saw something flicker in Cole's expression, something that made her breath catch. Then he looked away, clearing his throat. "We should head back. I will bring you those soil samples this afternoon." The ride back to the ranch was quieter, but not uncomfortably so. Lydia's mind was already working through testing protocols and potential solutions for the pasture. But part of her attention remained on the man riding beside her, on the puzzle he represented. Cole Anders was clearly intelligent and observant, despite his rough exterior. He noticed things, understood things in a way Harold Ashford did not seem to. He valued her mind, encouraged her interests, and he was handsome in a way that made her far too aware of him, which was dangerous and foolish. In 4 days, she would marry Harold Ashford. Cole was his employee, someone who would be part of her life here but could never be more than that. She needed to remember that to maintain appropriate distance. But even as she told herself this, she could not quite stop the warmth that spread through her when Cole smiled at something she said, or the way her eyes kept drifting to him as they rode. Back at the ranch, Cole helped her dismount, his hand steady on her waist. For just a moment, they stood close enough that she could smell the scent of leather and horses and something uniquely him. Then he stepped back, the moment broken. "I will get you those samples after lunch," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you, I will set up my testing equipment." Lydia went back to the house, her mind whirling with thoughts she knew she should not be having. Rosa had lunch ready, though Harold was still absent. Lydia ate alone, then went to her room and unpacked her father's testing equipment. The familiar instruments calmed her. This was something she understood, something she could control. Chemistry and geology did not care about inappropriate attractions or complicated feelings. They simply were, following immutable laws that could be studied and understood. She was arranging her testing materials on the dresser when Rosa knocked and entered, looking concerned. The older woman spoke rapidly in Spanish, gesturing toward Lydia's dusty dress and dirt-streaked hands. Lydia understood enough to realize Rosa was shocked by her appearance. "I was examining soil," she tried to explain, "for the ranch, to help the grass grow better." Rosa's expression suggested she thought Lydia had lost her mind. But she simply shook her head, collected the soiled dress, and pointed firmly toward the wash basin, making it clear Lydia should clean herself up properly. By the time Lydia had washed and changed into a fresh dress, Cole had arrived with several leather pouches, each carefully labeled with the area of the pasture it came from. He handed them to her in the hallway, clearly not wanting to be seen entering her room alone. "These should give you a good cross-section," he said. "I marked the locations on this map." He handed her a hand-drawn diagram of the North Pasture. "This is excellent work, thank you." She accepted the samples carefully. "If you need anything else, just let me know." He hesitated. "And Miss Peterson, what you are doing, it matters, even if Mr. Ashford does not say so." Before she could respond, he turned and left. Lydia stood in the hallway, holding the soil samples, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. She spent the rest of the afternoon running tests, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of scientific inquiry. The results confirmed her initial assessment. The soil was highly alkaline, with a pH of nearly 8.5. It was also deficient in nitrogen and organic matter, and the clay content was too low to retain water effectively. But it was not hopeless. With proper amendment, the pasture could be reclaimed. She made careful notes, developing a plan that would take several months to implement, but should ultimately restore the land's productivity. She was so absorbed in her work that she did not realize how much time had passed, until Rosa knocked to tell her dinner would be ready soon. Lydia quickly washed the chemicals from her hands and went downstairs. Harold was already at the table, looking tired and dusty from his day. He nodded to her as she entered but did not speak until after Rosa had served the meal. "Cole tells me you examined the north pasture today," he said abruptly. Lydia's heart sank. Was he angry that she had gone without his explicit permission? "Yes, sir. I hope that was acceptable. Mr. Anders mentioned you had given approval." "I did." Harold cut into his steak methodically. "What did you find?" "The soil is too alkaline and lacks proper nutrients and organic content, but it can be improved with proper treatment. I have developed a preliminary plan if you would like to see it." After dinner, they ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Harold spoke again, his tone thoughtful rather than critical. "This knowledge of yours, where did you learn it?" "My father taught me the basics. He believed education was important for everyone, regardless of gender. After he died, I continued studying on my own. The Boston Library had good scientific texts. Unusual education for a woman." Lydia had heard this before, in tones ranging from admiration to condemnation. She could not quite tell which Harold meant. Perhaps, but useful nonetheless. He returned to his meal, offering no further comment. After dinner, Lydia brought down her notes and explained her findings and recommendations in detail. Harold listened carefully, asking occasional questions that showed he understood the principles she described, even if he was unfamiliar with the technical terms. "This would cost money," he said finally, studying her calculations. "Sulfur, manure, the labor to spread it all." "Yes, but the pasture would become productive again. You could run more cattle, increase your profits. The investment would pay for itself within a few years." He nodded slowly. "Let me think on it, but the work is sound, I can see that." He looked at her directly for the first time since she had arrived. "You have a good mind, Miss Peterson. I had not expected that, despite your letters." It was hardly a declaration of affection, but it was more warmth than he had shown before. Lydia allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." That night, lying in bed, Lydia felt the first stirrings of hope. Perhaps she could make a real life here after all. Harold would never be a romantic figure, but if he respected her mind and allowed her to use her skills, that might be enough. It had to be enough. But as she drifted toward sleep, it was not Harold's face she saw in her mind. It was Cole's, the way he had looked at her in the pasture, the passion in his voice when he had defended her worth. She pushed the thought away firmly. That way lay only heartache and ruin. The next 3 days fell into a pattern. Lydia spent her mornings helping Rosa with household tasks, learning the rhythms of ranch life. The afternoons she devoted to her soil studies, developing detailed plans for improving not just the north pasture, but other areas of the ranch as well. Harold remained distant but not unkind. He approved her plan for the north pasture and even seemed interested in her other proposals. But he showed no inclination toward personal conversation or building any kind of emotional connection. Cole, she saw frequently. He brought her additional soil samples she requested, helped her locate supplies she needed for her tests, and engaged her in long discussions about ranch management and land improvement. He listened to her ideas with genuine interest, challenged her thinking in ways that sharpened her conclusions, and treated her as an intellectual equal. She tried to maintain proper distance, to keep their interactions professional, but it grew harder each day. There was something about Cole that drew her like iron to a lodestone. The way his face lit up when he smiled, the competence with which he moved through his work, the kindness he showed to both animals and people, the quick intelligence that flashed in his dark eyes. And sometimes she caught him looking at her in a way that made her breath catch. a way that spoke of things neither of them could acknowledge. On Saturday, the day before her wedding, Lydia was in the kitchen helping Rosa prepare bread when Cole came to the back door. His hat was in his hands, his expression serious. "Miss Peterson, I wonder if I might have a word, in private." Rosa looked between them, her expression knowing in a way that made Lydia's cheeks heat, but she simply nodded and shooed them both outside. They walked a short distance from the house, stopping near the corral fence. The afternoon sun beat down relentlessly, but Lydia barely noticed. Her heart was pounding, though she could not have said if it was from hope or fear. "Tomorrow you marry Mr. Ashford," Cole said without preamble. "Yes." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "And that is what you want?" Truly, the question hung between them, weighted with everything they had not said over the past few days. Lydia knew she should say yes, should affirm her choice and close this door firmly. But the words would not come. "I came here to build a life," she said instead, "to find security and purpose. Harold can provide both." "That was not what I asked." Cole stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Do you want to marry him? Not can you tolerate it, not is it practical. Do you want it?" "What I want does not matter." The words came out sharp, defensive. "The world does not care what women want, it cares what we need to survive. It matters to me." His voice was low, intense. "You matter to me." Lydia's breath caught. "Cole, you should not say such things." "Why not?" "Because it is inconvenient. Because you have already decided to settle for a man who treats you like a useful tool instead of a person." He was not touching her, but she felt the pull between them like a physical force. "You deserve more than that, Lydia. You deserve someone who sees you, all of you, and values what they see. And I suppose you think you are that person." She meant it to sound dismissive, but it came out breathless instead. "I know I am." He said it simply, with complete certainty. "I have known it since that first day, when you talked about soil composition with more passion than most people talk about their dreams. When you looked at this hard land and saw possibilities instead of disappointments. This is impossible." Lydia turned away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. "Even if I felt the same, which I am not saying I do, what could we do? I have no money to leave, nowhere to go, and I gave Harold my word. A word given under false pretenses. He advertised for a wife interested in agricultural science, then dismissed your knowledge as unimportant. You came here in good faith. He is not holding up his end of the bargain. He approved my plans for the pasture, only because I convinced him to listen. Left to himself, he would have you spend all your time on household tasks and bearing his children, letting your mind waste away." Cole moved to stand in front of her again, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Is that really the life you want?" Tears stung Lydia's eyes. "What I want is to not be poor anymore, to not wonder if I will be able to afford food next week, to have a place in the world instead of just scraping by on the edges of it." "I understand that. Truly I do." His voice gentled. "But Lydia, there are other ways. You could find work using your knowledge. Schools need science teachers. Some of the agricultural colleges are even starting to admit women. You could make your own way." "On what money?" She brushed angrily at her eyes. "I used everything I had just to pay my debts and buy passage here. I have nothing left." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I have savings. 8 years of wages, most of it put aside because I had nothing to spend it on. It is yours if you need it, to go wherever you want, do whatever you choose." Lydia stared at him, shocked. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "I am not asking you to marry me instead, though God knows I would if I thought you would say yes. I am just saying you have choices. You do not have to settle for half a life just because you are afraid. I barely know you." But her fingers curled around his, betraying her words. "You know me well enough to trust me with your passion for soil science, with your dreams of what this land could be. That is more than many married couples share." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. "And I know you well enough to see your courage, your intelligence, your determination, well enough to know that I want to spend my life learning the rest. This is madness." But she did not pull her hand away. "Maybe. But it is honest madness, not the slow death of a marriage without love or respect." Lydia closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the choice before her. Safety and security with Harold, or the terrifying possibility of something more with Cole. Practicality or hope, survival or truly living. "I need to think," she whispered. "Of course." Cole squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "But Lydia, whatever you decide, know this: you are remarkable. Any man who cannot see that is a fool, and any life that does not let you flourish is a waste. You deserve everything." He walked away then, leaving her standing by the corral fence with her heart in pieces and her mind spinning. That night, Lydia could not sleep. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, weighing her options over and over. With Harold, she would have security. A roof over her head, food to eat, no more fear of poverty. He had approved her pasture project, which suggested he might allow her to pursue other agricultural work. It would not be a happy marriage, but it would be stable, safe. But Cole was right. Harold would never truly value her mind, her capabilities. She would always be secondary to the ranch, an useful addition but not a true partner. And there would be no affection, no tenderness, no passion. Just duty and function. With Cole, everything was uncertain. He had savings, yes, but was it enough to live on while she found work? And what if she could not find work? What if no school would hire a woman science teacher, no college would admit her? They could end up destitute, and she would have dragged him down with her. But Cole saw her. Really saw her in a way no one had since her father died. He valued her mind, encouraged her dreams, believed in her capabilities. And when he looked at her, she felt things she had never expected to feel. Hope, excitement, the flutter of something that might be love given the chance to grow. She thought about her father, about what he would advise. He had always told her to choose truth over comfort, growth over security. He had believed that a life lived fully, even with its risks and struggles, was worth more than a safe but small existence. As dawn began to lighten her window, Lydia made her decision. Her hands shook as she rose and dressed, but her mind was clear. She knew what she had to do. She found Harold in the dining room, already finishing his breakfast. He looked up as she entered, his expression neutral. "Good morning, Miss Peterson. Rosa has your meal ready." "Thank you, but I need to speak with you first." Lydia remained standing, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I am afraid I cannot marry you today." Harold set down his coffee cup carefully. "I see. May I ask why? You are a good man, Mr. Ashford, and you have been fair with me, but I do not believe we would suit. You need a wife who is content with traditional roles, who will not push for more than you want to give. That is not me. This is about your soil studies." It was not a question, partly. But more than that, it is about what kind of life I want to live. I need someone who values my mind as much as my housekeeping, who sees me as a partner rather than an employee. I do not think you can be that person, through no fault of your own. We simply want different things. Harold was quiet for a long moment, studying her. "This is about Cole." Lydia felt heat rise in her cheeks but did not deny it. "Cole has shown me what is possible when someone truly values you. Whether anything comes of that or not, I cannot unsee it. I cannot settle for less now that I know more exists." "He is a good man," Harold said slowly. Hard-working, honest. But he has little to offer beyond his wages. Life with him would be hard, uncertain. I know, but it would be mine, built on honesty and respect. That is worth more to me than security without affection." Harold nodded as if confirming something to himself. "I cannot say I am surprised. I saw how he looked at you and you at him. I told myself it did not matter, that you would honor your commitment regardless." He stood, moving to look out the window. "But I suppose a marriage begun that way would have been poison for all of us. I am sorry to have come all this way only to refuse you." Lydia's voice was thick with genuine regret. "You have been generous, and I have wasted your time and money." "Not wasted. You solved a problem with my north pasture that I have been struggling with for years. And you have taught me something about what I should truly be looking for in a wife if I seek one again." He turned back to her. "I will not lie and say I am happy about this, but I respect your honesty. Thank you." Relief flooded through Lydia. "I will leave as soon as I can arrange transportation. Take the day to sort your affairs. Cole can drive you to town tomorrow if that is your plan." "It is. Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Ashford." She left him there and went to find Cole. Her heart was pounding as she walked to the barn, not from fear now but from anticipation. She was choosing uncertainty, yes, but she was also choosing possibility. Cole was in the barn, mucking out stalls. He looked up as she approached, his expression guarded. "I told Harold I cannot marry him," Lydia said without preamble. Cole froze, the pitchfork still in his hands. "Why?" "Because you were right. I deserve more than a marriage of convenience to a man who tolerates my interests but does not share them. I deserve someone who sees me as a partner and equal." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I deserve someone like you." The pitchfork clattered to the ground as Cole crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. "Lydia, are you certain?" "I meant what I said about the money, about you being free to choose your own path. You do not have to choose me." "I know I do not have to. I want to." She looked up at him, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "I am choosing you, Cole, if you will have me, if I will have you." His laugh was half disbelief, half joy. "Lydia, I have been half in love with you since you started talking about mineral deficiencies like they were the most fascinating thing in the world. If you will have me, rough foreman with no prospects beyond my horse and my savings, then I am yours. I am a mail-order bride who analyzes soil samples for entertainment. I think we are well matched." Cole cupped her face in his hands, his calloused palms gentle against her skin. "May I kiss you?" In answer, Lydia rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was everything she had not known she was missing. Tender and passionate, sweet and desperate all at once. Cole's arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into his embrace. This was right, she knew it in her bones. This was what love should feel like. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "What do we do now?" "Now," Lydia smiled up at him. "Now we figure it out together. You said something about savings and possibilities. I have knowledge and determination. Between us, we can build something. We can build everything." Cole kissed her again, soft and full of promise. "Where do you want to go? What do you want to do?" "I am not sure yet, but I know I want to keep studying soil, improving land. Maybe we could find a ranch that needs better management, somewhere we could implement all my ideas." She paused, an idea forming. "Or we could start our own operation, small at first. Focus on land reclamation, turning unproductive soil into productive pasture." Cole's eyes lit up. "That could work. There is plenty of cheap land that people have given up on because they do not know how to improve it. If we could buy a section, prove your methods work, we could build a reputation. We would need to be somewhere with access to ranchers who might hire us for consultation as well, to supplement income while we establish ourselves. Lydia's mind was already racing ahead, seeing possibilities. What about staying in this area? Fort Stockton is growing and there are plenty of struggling ranches around. If we bought land nearby, we would already have some contacts. Cole hesitated. That is, if you would not mind staying close to Mr. Ashford. I need to give him proper notice anyway and it might be awkward. Lydia considered this. Actually, I think staying near might be wise. Harold understands the value of my work now. He could be our first client spreading word to other ranchers. And this is good country for what we want to do, plenty of degraded land that needs improvement. Then we will stay. Cole pulled her close again, and Lydia rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. We should get married as soon as possible. I do not want there to be any question about propriety. The minister was supposed to perform the ceremony today anyway. Perhaps he would be willing to marry us instead. Lydia looked up at Cole. That is, if you are sure. This is happening very fast. I have never been more sure of anything. Cole kissed her forehead. You are the answer to questions I did not even know to ask. I want to build a life with you, Lydia, starting right now. They went to find Harold together, hands clasped tight. He was in his office, ledgers spread before him. He looked up as they entered, his expression unreadable. Mr. Ashford, Cole began, I want to give you proper notice. I will be leaving your employment. To marry Miss Peterson, I assume. Yes, sir. We are hoping to start our own operation, focusing on land reclamation and soil improvement. I will stay on for 2 weeks to help you find and train a replacement if you are willing. Harold studied them both for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It was small and brief, but genuine. I think I saw this coming before either of you did. You are well matched. He turned to Lydia. Will you be staying in the area? We are considering it. And I wanted to propose that you be our first client. The plan I developed for your north pasture, I would like to oversee its implementation. For a fair consulting fee, of course. Of course. Harold's smile grew slightly. I think that could be arranged. And I will spread word among other ranchers if your work proves successful. Thank you, sir. Cole's relief was evident. I appreciate your understanding more than I can say. Just do good work and treat her right. That is thanks enough. Harold returned to his ledgers. The conversation clearly concluded. Outside, Lydia and Cole looked at each other and began to laugh, giddy with relief and joy and the sheer improbability of everything that had happened. We are really doing this, Lydia said. We really are. Cole picked her up and spun her around, making her squeal with surprise and delight. Rosa came out onto the porch, drawn by the commotion. When she saw them together, she clapped her hands and said something in rapid Spanish that needed no translation. Then she pulled Lydia into a warm embrace, patting her cheek and nodding approvingly at Cole. They went to town that afternoon to speak with the minister. Reverend Thompson was a kind-faced man in his 50s who had indeed been prepared to perform a wedding that day. When they explained the situation, his eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. This is highly irregular, he said. You are sure about this, Miss Peterson? You only arrived a few days ago. I am certain, Reverend. Cole is the man I should marry. I see that now. The minister looked at Cole. And you, young man, you are prepared to take on the responsibility of a wife. More than prepared, sir. Eager. Well. Reverend Thompson shook his head but looked more amused than disapproving. I suppose love works on its own timeline. Very well, I will marry you. But I insist you wait until next Sunday. Take this week to be absolutely certain. If you still want to proceed, then I will perform the ceremony. It was not what they had hoped, but it was reasonable. They agreed and returned to the ranch. where Cole moved into the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands to preserve propriety. The week that followed was the strangest and most wonderful of Lydia's life. She spent her days working with Cole to plan their future. They rode out to look at available land, discussed business strategies, and refined her soil improvement techniques. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and dreams and quirks, and they fell deeper in love with each passing day. Cole showed her parts of the ranch she had not seen before, shared his knowledge of the land and animals, listened with genuine interest as she explained the chemistry behind her soil amendments. He made her laugh with stories of his mishaps as a young ranch hand. He held her hand as they watched the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Lydia had never been happier. This was what she had not even known to hope for when she left Boston. Not just security or purpose, but partnership. Love. A true meeting of minds and hearts. On Sunday, they stood before Reverend Thompson in the small church, with Harold and Rosa as witnesses. Lydia wore her best dress, and Cole had gotten a haircut and wore a new shirt. They spoke their vows clearly, their eyes never leaving each other's faces. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her with such tenderness that Lydia felt tears slip down her cheeks. These were tears of joy, of hope, of overwhelming gratitude that she had been brave enough to choose this. After the ceremony, they had a simple celebration at the ranch. Rosa had prepared a feast, and even Harold seemed genuinely happy for them. He gave them a wedding gift of a section of land adjacent to his ranch, rocky and unproductive, but theirs. "Consider it an investment," he said. "If you can make this land productive, every rancher in Texas will want to hire you." That night, in a small house they had rented in Fort Stockton, Cole and Lydia began their married life. He was gentle and patient, taking time to learn what pleased her, and Lydia discovered that physical intimacy could be beautiful when it came from love and respect. Afterward, lying in Cole's arms, she traced patterns on his chest and marveled at how her life had changed. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, his voice rumbling under her ear. "I am thinking about soil," she admitted. He laughed, the sound vibrating through both of them. "Of course you are. No, listen. I was remembering something my father told me once. He said that all soil is made of broken-down rock and organic matter, the remains of living things. That in a sense, all earth is made of the same materials, just in different proportions and combinations." "I am not sure I follow." Lydia propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "When I tested that soil you brought me from the North Pasture, I also tested samples from other parts of the ranch, and from the town, even from my own clothes after that first day in the field. And the base composition is the same. The minerals, the elements, they are all from this place. This earth." She placed her hand over his heart. "I came here as a stranger from soil formed in Massachusetts, but now I am part of this place. The dust that clings to my skirts, the water I drink, the food Rosa grows in her garden, it is all changing me at a fundamental level, making me part of Texas earth." Cole covered her hand with his, understanding dawning in his eyes. "And me? Your family came from Missouri, but you have been here 8 years, long enough to become part of this soil too," she smiled. "We are made of the same earth now, you and I. Formed from the same elements, shaped by the same sun and wind and water, different combinations of the same materials, but fundamentally compatible. That is quite possibly the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." Cole pulled her down for a kiss. "I love you, my brilliant, strange, wonderful wife. I love you too." They spent the next months working harder than Lydia had ever worked in her life, but she had never been happier. They focused first on Harold's North Pasture, implementing Lydia's soil improvement plan with meticulous care. It was backbreaking work, spreading sulfur and composted manure, working it into the soil, planting cover crops to add nitrogen and organic matter. But within 6 weeks, they saw results. The grass began to grow greener, fuller. The cattle that had refused to graze there before now sought it out. Word spread among the neighboring ranchers, and soon Lydia and Cole had more consulting requests than they could handle. They worked on their own land too, slowly transforming the rocky section Harold had given them. Lydia discovered that while the soil was poor, it sat above a good water source. They dug a well and used the water to support targeted plantings, creating a demonstration area where they could show potential clients different soil improvement techniques. Cole handled the business side, negotiating contracts and managing their finances. Lydia focused on the science, constantly testing and experimenting and refining her methods. Together, they made a formidable team. By their first anniversary, they had saved enough to buy another section of degraded land at a good price. By their second, they owned 5 sections and employed 2 workers to help with the heavier labor. Their reputation had spread beyond Fort Stockton, and ranchers came from as far as San Antonio to seek Lydia's advice. Harold became not just a client but a friend. He remarried eventually, to a widow from town who was content with traditional roles and who brought warmth to his cold house. He and Cole maintained their easy partnership, and Harold often sent new clients their way. Rosa became like a grandmother to Lydia, teaching her to cook and keep a house the Texas way, learning bits of English while Lydia learned Spanish. The old woman beamed when Lydia told her she was expecting their first child. Their son was born in the spring of 1879, a healthy boy with Cole's dark eyes and Lydia's stubborn determination. They named him Daniel, after Lydia's father. Cole was a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching Daniel about the land and animals as he grew. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, red-faced and squalling and perfect. They named her Rose after Rosa, who had been so kind to Lydia when she was a stranger in a strange land. Lydia continued her work throughout her pregnancies and after, simply adjusting her schedule to accommodate nursing and childcare. Cole supported her completely, often caring for the children while she worked, never suggesting that motherhood should eclipse her other pursuits. Their children grew up playing in the soil their mother studied, learning the science of land management alongside reading and arithmetic. Daniel showed an early aptitude for chemistry, while Rose loved working with the cattle and horses. By 1885, Lydia and Cole owned 15 sections of formerly unproductive land, all of it transformed into profitable pasture through careful soil management. They had published articles in agricultural journals, and Lydia had been invited to speak at the Texas Agricultural College, one of the first women to do so. But more than their professional success, they had built a life full of love and purpose and joy. They still rode out together to examine soil samples, still spent evenings discussing land management strategies. But they also watched sunsets together, played with their children, made love with the passion of new lovers and the tenderness of old friends. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the house they had built on their reclaimed land, watching Daniel and Rose chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, Cole took Lydia's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing this uncertain path instead of security with Harold?" Lydia thought about the question seriously, as she always did. Not for a single moment. This life, this wonderful, complicated, sometimes difficult life we have built together, it is worth more than 100 safe, comfortable existences. Even when money was tight. When we were not sure we could make the business work, even then, because we faced those challenges together as partners." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You were right, that day in the pasture. I deserved someone who saw me as a whole person, who valued my mind as much as my ability to keep a house or bear children. You have given me that every day since." "You gave me something too," Cole said softly. "Purpose beyond just working for someone else. A reason to build something that would last. And you gave me a family, something I had not let myself hope for." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sky darkened and stars began to emerge. Lydia thought about her journey from Boston, about the frightened woman who had stepped off the train in Fort Stockton 9 years ago. That woman had been seeking safety and security, willing to settle for a marriage without love. She had found so much more. She had found partnership and passion, challenge and growth, a love that deepened with each passing year. She had found her place in the world, not by accepting limitations but by refusing them. And she had found Cole, her partner in all things, the man who saw her clearly and loved her completely. As if reading her thoughts, Cole squeezed her hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For being brave enough to choose this, to choose us, to choose love over safety. Thank you for showing me I could, for seeing me when I felt invisible." They called the children in as full darkness fell, settling them into bed with the easy routine of years of practice. Later, in their own bed, Cole pulled Lydia close. "I still think about that first day sometimes," he said. "You standing on that platform, looking lost and determined all at once. I knew then that you were someone special." "I thought you were just the foreman sent to fetch me," Lydia admitted. "I had no idea you would become everything to me. Funny how things work out." "Not funny, right? This is how things were supposed to work out." She kissed him softly. "We are made of the same earth, you and I. We were always meant to find each other." "The same earth," Cole repeated, smiling. "I like that. Different elements combined in just the right proportions." "Exactly. The perfect soil composition to grow a love like ours." They made love then, with the easy intimacy of long familiarity mixed with the excitement that still sparked between them. Afterward, Lydia lay in Cole's arms and thought about the future. Their children would grow and find their own paths. Daniel might become a chemist or doctor, Rose perhaps a rancher or veterinarian. The land they had reclaimed would continue to produce, supporting not just their family but the community around them. Their methods would spread, helping to transform degraded land across Texas and beyond. But the foundation of it all would always be this: the love she and Cole had built, as solid and enduring as the earth beneath their feet. Years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Their consulting business flourished, becoming the premier land reclamation service in West Texas. Lydia published a book on soil management techniques for arid climates that became required reading at agricultural colleges across the country. Cole developed innovative grazing rotation strategies that maximized land productivity while maintaining soil health. Their children thrived. Daniel did indeed develop a passion for chemistry, earning a scholarship to the University of Texas. Rose showed such talent with animals that by age 15, she was helping to manage their growing cattle operation. They were both proud of their mother's accomplishments, having grown up understanding that women's minds were just as valuable as men's. Harold remained a steady friend and supporter until his death in 1892, leaving a portion of his ranch to Cole and Lydia in his will, along with a letter expressing gratitude for showing him what true partnership in marriage could look like, even if he never quite achieved it himself. Rosa lived to see Daniel graduate from university, beaming with pride as if he were her own grandson. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at age 78, Lydia wept as she would have for her own mother. They buried her in the Fort Stockton cemetery, and Lydia planted her favorite flowers on the grave every spring. By their 25th anniversary in 1901, Lydia and Cole owned 30 sections of productive land and employed 15 workers. They had transformed thousands of additional acres through consulting work. They had raised 2 successful, happy children who were now making their own ways in the world. Daniel had married a fellow chemist and was teaching at the university. Rose had married a neighboring rancher and was implementing her mother's soil techniques on their combined properties. And through it all, through every challenge and triumph, Lydia and Cole's love had only deepened. They still worked side by side, still discussed soil composition with the same passion they had at the beginning. But now there were grandchildren to spoil, a legacy to contemplate, a lifetime of shared memories to cherish. On their anniversary, Cole took Lydia back to the north pasture where they had first really talked, where she had knelt in the alkaline soil and seen possibilities instead of problems. The land was lush now, supporting healthy cattle, transformed by the techniques she had pioneered. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" Cole asked, his hair now silver but his eyes as warm as ever. "About all of us being made from the same earth." "I remember everything about those first days," Lydia said, taking his hand. His palm was still calloused from work, still warm and steady. "I have been thinking about it lately, about how right you were." He gestured to the pasture, to the land spreading out around them. "This soil, it is different now than it was 25 years ago. We changed its composition, added what was missing, balanced what was excessive, made it into something it could not have been on its own." "That is what love does too," Lydia said softly, understanding. "It changes us at our most fundamental level, adds what we are missing, balances our excesses. Makes us into something we could not have been alone." "Exactly. When I met you, I was like this pasture was, functional but incomplete, missing essential elements. You added what I lacked, and I hope I did the same for you." "You did. You absolutely did." Lydia moved into his embrace, fitting against him as perfectly as she had for a quarter century. "We transformed each other, the way we transformed this land, made each other into the best versions of ourselves." "Made from the same earth," Cole murmured against her hair. "Perfectly compatible composition." They stood there as the sun set, 2 people who had found in each other everything they needed to grow and flourish. Around them, the land they had healed whispered in the evening breeze, grass rustling like applause. Lydia thought about the frightened woman who had stepped off the train all those years ago, clutching her trunk of books and testing equipment, hoping only for security and a place to use her knowledge. She could never have imagined this rich, full life, this deep, abiding love, this legacy of transformed land and scientific advancement. But more than any of that, she treasured the man beside her. Cole, who had seen her when she felt invisible, valued her when she felt worthless, loved her when she thought she would have to settle for mere tolerance. He had given her not just a life but a partnership, not just security but purpose, not just companionship but passion. "I love you," she said, the words as fresh as the first time she had spoken them. "More than I can ever adequately express." "I know," Cole said, tilting her face up to kiss her. "Because I feel the same. And I thank God every day that you were brave enough to choose this, to choose us." As darkness fell and stars emerged in the vast Texas sky, they walked hand in hand back to the house they had built together, on land they had reclaimed together, to the life they had created together. 2 people made from the same earth, combined in the perfect composition to create something beautiful and lasting and true. Their love had transformed not just each other, but the very ground beneath their feet, leaving a legacy that would endure for generations. And as they settled into the comfortable routine of their evening, surrounded by the fruits of their shared labor and love, they knew that they had found what so many search for but few truly discover. They had found home. Not just a place, but a person. Not just security, but purpose. Not just survival, but a life fully and joyfully lived. Made from the same earth, perfectly matched, deeply loved, and completely whole. The end.